And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 130th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, February 25th, 2020, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, it was a very good week, to say the least, for the IU men's basketball land. So we're going to talk about the huge victories at Minnesota and against, at the time, number 9 Penn State at home. Then that'll kind of segue into how Indiana can finish strong. We'll kind of talk about the last 4 games of the regular season going into the Big Ten tournament, and then if Indiana can basically make it to the big dance. And then we will wrap up with a preview of at Purdue and at Illinois. But here with me tonight, it is the sort of kind of OG crew of the Hoosier Sound. Just Matt and I are here tonight, as Nathan's got a bunch of stuff to do. So Matt, how are you doing tonight, especially after a week off of podcasting?
It was a nice week off. You guys had a great show last week, some really insightful stuff, and I enjoyed listening to it while I was chilling out here at home. But yeah, I was really not expecting us to have this positive of a podcast this week after seeing what gauntlet we had ahead of us, and going to Minnesota in the barn, which is a hard place to play, and then having a Penn State team that beat our butts off in Happy Valley coming to IU. And I thought, well, you know what? I could very well see this, week going 0-2, but here we are sitting 2 wins and a road win, a Big Ten win, and all of a sudden we're talking about, how many more wins we got to get into the tournament instead of does the coaching to be fired. So this is wonderful turnaround here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, as I'd say, the last time we talked was right before Indiana. The last time we talked with you particularly is what I mean. The last time we talked was right before the win of three of 4 games, and on that 4-game losing streak for Indiana. To put it into perspective, that was just after Indiana had lost that very close game to Maryland, and then Penn State blew out Indiana in the second half at Penn State. Ohio State blew out Indiana. Purdue basically felt like blew out Indiana at home, and that was when we podcasted last with you. Since then, which I guess if anything goes wrong this week, it's 100% your fault, and we're going to talk about that.
Step down.
Yeah, since Matt has podcasted, they've won 3 of 4, and obviously that one loss was real bad. But yeah, those other 3 wins are really huge for them. So. I know you were kind of in and out watching some of the games, but of course the first game we'll touch on just a tad, since it was basically a week ago. Indiana went into Minnesota and won 68-56, obviously a lot closer, but by the end of the game before they were able to close out a game. And isn't it nice for Indiana to actually close out a game instead of just biting our nails to the literally very last second, which is what usually happens. But they made their free throws and they were able to close out that game. But Matt, from catching some of the games or watching replays or anything, what were your takeaways from Indiana finally getting, I guess, what most fans are calling their first true road victory?
Is that our first true road victory?
No, because they beat
Nebraska.
They beat Nebraska, but as in, like, fans are saying that the first real opponent sounds really harsh, but Nebraska. But I guess the first opponent that wasn't in the bottom tier of the Big Ten.
Hey, Nebraska beat Purdue. We haven't beat Purdue.
Exactly.
So are they really the bottom tier of the Big Ten? No, the only bottom tier team in the Big Ten is Northwestern. Other than that, Nebraska is a serious team. They would be, probably the 3rd worst team in the ACC. As we like to dog on the ACC on this program. But anyways, to Minnesota, I did not watch the game, and this was a choice of mine because I was like, I got to buck this trend. Like, I've watched every minute of every game we've lost. You know what? I'm going to try to see it. If I don't watch this game, if we play better. So I didn't watch the game, and we won. I didn't watch a single second of it. It was great. I kept up on Twitter, followed a lot of you lovely people, a lot of our listeners talking about it on Twitter, talking back and forth, making sure I was keeping up with the Hoosier Sound Twitter account. And then all the other official accounts, Big Ten and Fox or whoever was covering it, tweeting stuff out. So I got to, kind of see some stuff in real time. But my main takeaway was we are so lucky and blessed to have Trace Jackson Davis in an IU uniform. I cannot imagine this season without him. This is by far his best game. It's not the most points he's scored. It's, not even the most efficient game he's had. But in my opinion, that was his standout performance as a Hoosier, and I don't think I have to be. I'm not the only person in the room that believes that.
Are you talking about the Minnesota game for
And
most
Minnesota
points
game.
that he's? Well, that was the most points that he has scored.
Was
so
it
you
the
are
most
right
points?
27 points.
Okay, well, my bad. I thought it was. I thought he maybe scored a little bit
You can just
more in
add.
November.
You can just add the offensive production that he had to.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, 27 points,
comment.
16 rebounds, 2 blocks against a really good forward, Turu, who we talked about, or you guys talked about on the podcast last week as being a real threat to this Indiana team, and an NBA prospect in Turu, and Trey Jackson-Davis made him his smaller little brother. So it was a wonderful showing from him, and then also our guards didn't play awful. I didn't mind what Rob Finney gave to us. I didn't mind what Al Durham gave to us. Devontae Green was 3 of 9 with 11 points, but like I will take that. He hit 3 big threes in that game. So that is something that's very rare. We don't hit threes on the road. We don't seem to do anything on the road, really. But for us to get a big road win, Trey Jackson-Davis to finally find some footing on the road in the Big Ten was huge.
Yeah, and it was. I just checked. It was Trace Jackson-Davis was 25 points against Nebraska at home was his second largest. Second. So totally agree with everything you were saying. I'm putting something else together while you were also talking, but. And when you actually look at the box score, I like the comments you said about a lot of the guard play as well, because if you look at the box score, and if you take away Devontae Green and Race Thompson's offensive contributions, then the next the fourth person to score the next most amount of points was Al Durham and Rob Finney at 6 and 7. Otherwise, you're not getting much from anyone else. But that's not necessarily what you needed. They were able to kind of, and they used that same model against Penn State with Lamar Stevens, where, and it wasn't as much as they were able to use I'm talking in circles as I'm trying to do 5 things at once. To where they basically locked down that top outstanding star, and then they kind of or they locked down everyone else besides that top
star,
outstanding star. So then Oturu actually didn't have the most amount of points scored from Minnesota, but it seemed like he shot 15 shots, which was by far the most that Minnesota had. So they were able to kind of rein him back in when he played the second most amount of minutes that Minnesota had, and just then we go over to Indiana side offensively. That's all they needed was from Trace, and he was able to be efficient. 11 from 15. He had obviously the 16 rebounds too, which is what your original comment was, that not just the offensive points, that this was his best game, even if you take out some of the official offensive totals. And it was just awesome to see his game, and I think then. What also carried over into the next game was the kind of play that we got from Race Thompson, and the type of player that he's starting to emerge as, and how we were all really crossing our fingers he could get one more point so he could get an official double-double, since he was just 1 point shy of a double-double there, but 10 rebounds, and he only played 25 minutes, and it seemed like he was someone that contributed a lot more than just maybe the box score was saying. But the box score doesn't need to say much for Hoosier fans, because everyone's right now is on the Trace and Race train.
As for sure, this week has been his coming out party. I would like to say. I mean, we saw signs of it. Official one, yeah. We saw signs of it
for 2 games in a row.
Yeah, we saw signs of it early in the season against a couple teams. Saw him go in there. You hear people on Twitter talking about how he's IU's best defender or whatnot. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. Like he looks good, but like, are we sure this is the real thing? Can I see it more than once in a row before he gets injured? And it's like these last 2 games have shown it's like when this guy is healthy and clicking, he might be our second or third best player on this team. And that's not a limb, I'm alone on. And look, what he did in that Minnesota game, going home for him, he's from Minnesota, 9 points, 10 rebounds, a steal, and a block. He just offers a lot more than what shows up in that box score. Like, his hustle plays. He had so many in the Penn State game where he's like the first guy on the floor for a ball, or he's fighting off three guys for a rebound, and that rebound should count for like two because it's just way harder. He could have just easily given up and been like, "There's three guys, they get an offensive rebound." No, Race was not that person. Race goes up like a man, two hands, grabs it out of the sky, and really is like given this IU team like a little kick in the butt, like a little injection of some adrenaline into this team when we really needed it. Like, right, we were talking about that rough stretch right before I was off the podcast, and won 3 of the last 4 games that has coincided with Race Thompson playing more. And I don't think that's an anomaly. I think that's really, truly the factor of he is one of the most impactful players in the Big Ten right now, and we need to keep riding that wave into Purdue on Thursday.
Yeah, and then let's move into some more of the guards and what we've been seeing from the guards, because I think if you put in when Indiana wins and loses, I think when the offense is successful, it's able to run through some of those big guys, whether it's Trace or Race, or if we can have Duran play like he did against Michigan when everyone else is playing up to his level, and then even Joey, if he shows signs from what he was able to do at the beginning of the year. Obviously getting the ball down low is what Indiana wants to do at first, but then when you've got the guards that basically just aren't hurting the team, and that's what we've wanted from the guards for most of the season, sadly, is just how can you at least not hurt this team and try and let some of those bigger guys down low able to score all the points for you. And in this game, credit to a lot of those guards, they didn't give the ball up. Indiana only had 10 total turnovers, and most of them or 6 of them were from Devontae and Rob. But if you're going to be able to give the kind of contributions that Trace was having, and I didn't feel like Rob necessarily had a really poor game, and if Indiana lost, that it was solely because of them turning the ball over. And you look at I think Devontae's case the past couple of games is an incredibly interesting player to look at, because he didn't have 27 or 30 points like those 2 big games he had in Indiana.
Nope.
And it didn't necessarily to score 30 points in order to win. And also, he didn't score 2 or no points or like 3 or 4 points for Indiana and they still lost. He was able to score just barely over double figures with 11 points. He had just about 25 minutes of play, and he was able to come in and give some sparks, because some of the 3-pointers he makes are just very timely 3-pointers. And I think he's hopeful, and again, there's never ever going to be a sure thing from Devontae, but no. I think he's starting to find a role that is able to suit him, that he's able to, at least if he's not hot, like 30-point game hot, that he's still able to come in and he knows that, all right, I can give 20 good minutes here and I can still get you 10 points and let the rest of the team basically able to kind of and just make it more of a team effort, which is, I think, what you and I are both circling around is that this team is becoming more team oriented, and it's not necessarily, and again, it kind of contradicts what we said with Trace having 27 points, but he still has to get the ball, and Devontae wasn't shooting a bunch of shots in order to basically give less shots to Trace.
Yeah, Trace isn't Kobe Bryant, right? He's not a ball stopper. Yeah. Trace has the ability to pass the ball, kick it out for threes. He's not going to be the guy that's going to like hunt the last shot in the game, even though we would like him to be that guy.
Yeah.
At times,
which is a whole other discussion. Yeah,
that is an entirely different discussion. That is for sure. But no, I mean, his success is a product of team success, which means he has the ability to, he creates the space. Like he boxes his guy out, he gets position, but you got to pass it to him, and you have to get in position to pass it to him. And that's the team's job, right? So it's all the factor of how well the team is playing. Trace is going to play as well as the team is playing. You can't blame Trace for only having, he had like 11 points, 9 points against Penn State back when we got walloped by them. And Trace was getting good position. The guys just weren't able to pass it into him. And when that happens, he's not going to score, right? If our best player doesn't touch the ball, he's not going to score. And if our best player doesn't score, we're not going to win. And I think the last couple games, our players have finally gone, maybe we should give the best player the ball. And I think the coaching staff has really stressed it. I think they stressed it since I was last on the podcast, since the Purdue game, really. They need to get him the ball, and that good things will happen if they do so. And the product on the court and the results are showing exactly what the coaching staff has been preaching. And what Archie Miller preached when he first got on campus, which was that we're going to play great team defense, but we held Minnesota at home to 56 points. We held a really good Penn State offense that has been pretty good and killing Big Ten defenses. Just ask Purdue. They went into Purdue and destroyed them. Really good Penn State offense to, I think it was, 60 points at our place when they scored 70, 80 something against us the first time around. Or definitely kicked our butt 64, but
it was 64.
They let off the gas.
The first half was really low, 28 points each. So that's why it was a lot lower scoring. And like you said, they did let up with the gas because it was a blowout.
Yeah, they blew us out. We played really good defense, and the adjustment on ball screens to not hedge as hard and kind of shift with the screen has really helped our defenders a lot. And then that's also coincides with, sadly, the removal of Joey Brunk from the main rotation and the insertion. I just made up a word.
Insertion.
The insertion of Deron Davis, who I thought at the beginning of the year was going to be our starting center, because when he came in, the 4-star top 50 guy, he's a senior, has lots of practice time with these guys. And, Joey, God bless him, was really good. He was stellar in that Florida State game that we played. He was instrumental in the Notre Dame game when we played them. But, he has been getting flamed on Twitter, and rightfully so, for his ball screen coverages, because it felt like every time that Purdue threw out a ball screen, they got to do whatever they wanted to because Joey was late on the ball screen. And Deron, who I don't know if we can count him as mobile, but has been shown to be a little bit more alert on defense than Joey has been. And then the adjustment by the staff has allowed Deron to cut out some of the wasted time that is hedging the screen and being able to get back. So he's able to get back faster. He's able to disrupt more, and has really helped out our defense in the minutes that he's been in there. And then on the offensive end, Deron has been one of our better players, I think, and more consistent players throughout the year. The problem is he just fouls a whole bunch and he's hardly in the game. But I think finally, as of recently, he's been getting his feet from under him. He's finally getting back. He's finally getting healthier and more in shape, and we're seeing that on the court.
Oh, he's for sure been moving a lot better the last couple of games. It's awesome to watch that he's the nimble self that relatively nimble self for himself, as nimble as he's basically been when it was whatever a couple summers ago when the amount of pounds that he lost basically and the shape that he was in at that point before obviously not even being able to walk for months, but like you said, the movement that he had, and it didn't help with the Penn State game that we're talking about right now. The Penn State game that the refs were going to call any and every single foul, and that it didn't help that he had 2 fouls at the beginning, and then he basically wasn't going to play just because the refs were going to call any and every foul. But going into the Penn State game, I think it was just kind of it was a home game, so Hoosier fans were almost like that. Indiana kind of needs to win in a way, but they understand if they might lose to Penn State because Penn State's a good team, but the Hoosiers really needed to get the win, especially for what they wanted to do. And like you said, the tough 2-game road schedule, let alone that Wisconsin game at the end of the season, isn't looking as winnable as it might have looked a couple weeks ago. So this was almost a must-win game, and the Hoosiers kind of did more of what they did against Minnesota, but also then in different ways itself. And this is the game that I think you can attribute more of that team effort around, because you see when Indiana's losing, you have the star players, I guess, some of the players playing the most minutes, like Trace, is going to play 35, 37 minutes. The highest person on this team only played 31 minutes because there were only 7 people because Joey and Duran and Al didn't play very much. Basically 7 people that played and was able to pass the ball, and not just because I think Justin Smith is the key example here, was just that everyone was contributing in some way, even if it wasn't necessarily points on the offensive end.
Yeah, this Penn State game was probably Al Durham's most impactful game as a Hoosier, if I can think of one. Like 14 points.
Because Michigan, he had a really good game, but obviously it was kind of overshadowed by everyone else.
Right. So 14 points, 3 rebounds, 1 3-pointer, and was a rock on offense at times when Penn State was going on a run. But Al played pretty good defense as well. He had 3 fouls in this game, but that doesn't really mean much because everybody was picking up fouls all over the place in this game. Race Thompson again was huge. Devontae Green had a pretty good game. It chucks up 8 threes, but makes 3 of them. Like, I'll take that from him.
And when he made basically the back-to-back 3-pointers was a key point in the game. He extended the lead to where they were able to get that massive. It helped contribute to getting that massive lead, which obviously they gave away. But we'll get into how impressive it was for him to come back. But at the time, it was really key in terms of Indiana pulling away from Penn State and starting to dwindle Penn State's confidence.
Yeah, and some people will talk about the fact that we gave up a 19-point lead and then we're losing and had to come back, and they had like a 20-something point run, right? And that is unfortunate.
It was like a 25-3 point run, I think was the worst of it at some point.
Yeah, which is atrocious.
Yes.
My mom left midway through the first half and then came back midway through the second half. I was like, what happened? And I was man. I don't know. I'm not watching. And then I turned it on and watched the end of the game, and then we won. So maybe it's not me watching. But anyways, that's besides the point. Not even the most well shot game from Trace. It wasn't his best average game. He's 6 of 17 from the field. Like, when's the last time we've seen Trace miss more than 6 shots in the game? That doesn't happen much, mainly because he doesn't take as many shots as he should.
That's 35% from the field, not from 3 from the field.
35% from the field, 1 of 3 from the free throw line. He was cold, had 13 points, and we still won a game. That's a team effort. I'm really proud of this team's mental toughness. The ability to, one, block out all the noise from outside. They were asked a bunch of questions in the press conference about how they block out the noise from the Hoosier faithful that we all know are very passionate and love this team, but really want success. And then also the fact that they gave up a 25-3 run mid-game and could have, and rightfully so, packed their bags in for the season.
Well, that's what they've usually done.
Yeah, and that's what they did last year. That's what last year's team would have done. And the year before that, what they would have done. But no, this team fought back, got the lead, and basically won this game by 10. The last second 2-point layup makes it an 8-point game, but it was a 10-point double-digit lead at the end of the game after a 25-3 run. And that takes really, really, really tough teams and kicks them out of the win column. You can put a lot of teams like a Duke or a North Carolina when they're really good and they let up a 25-3 run, you're not going to see them win 9 out of 10 times. But IU came back and found something within themselves to win this game, and I am really, really proud of them for doing so.
I think the biggest thing from this was just the growth that we've seen from this team. And you talked about how last year's and the year before's team wouldn't have been able to come finish the game after that. Most of the games this year, that same team wouldn't have been able to do that. But I kind of look at this as this was almost in some ways a very close image of what IU found themselves having 2 weeks ago. So they go, it was a home game, but it was against Michigan State at the time. Obviously, a Michigan State team that previously was playing much better than they have been since the IU game.
As of recent.
So it was a huge game, kind of. Exactly. Yeah. What's up with Indiana, basketball and football breaking Michigan State? But huge game, and maybe Minnesota might not be as big of a win as maybe Michigan State, but two big wins at that point in the middle of the week. Then you get to Sunday, you've got a really important game against Maryland, and the game didn't go quite like the Penn State game, but they were up, and then they were down, and they lost in the last second, obviously, and they could have had a huge week like we talked about. We said, what is this team made of? Go 1-1, great. Go 2-0. This is a team that you could force to be reckoned with, and they didn't. They lost Maryland at the last second, so it's kind of the same this week. Minnesota's like that Michigan State game. Penn State's like that Maryland game, and especially by the end of it, where Indiana was down by 5, up by 5 by the end, and it was like, all right. Is Indiana going to do exactly what they did 2 weeks ago, which started a 4-game losing streak, or are they going to battle back to the very end and come out on top? And like you said, they didn't just come out on top like the Minnesota game. They're able to pull away, and it wasn't a nail biter at the very last second, like the Michigan State game was a few weeks ago.
No, it was not a nail biter, which was nice and good for my blood pressure, because I've been really needing some blood pressure medicine this year. Really, seriously. Well,
it definitely was. It definitely was a few minutes before, though, for a lot of it, when they were coming back from that down 19 points.
I started watching because I was like, I got to buck the trend. So they took the lead. I think they were up 6. And I started watching, and Jerome hit the 3-pointer to bring
very
us very
key 3-pointer, by the way.
Yes. Has been covered in depth by most of the IU basketball media, but good on Jerome. He actually ended in some really good minutes, 3 points, 3 rebounds in 20 minutes. Doesn't look like much, but he wasn't a ball stopper, right? He kept the ball moving. He was a threat to shoot. And that's what we'll take from Jerome. And as he grows into his role and as he grows into a player at IU, he's going to be a monster someday. We all know this, but right now he has embraced his role on this team, and I'm really proud of him for doing so. We wouldn't say this was one of Rob's best games in the world, but 7 of 8 from the free throw line on a team
Penn State.
Yeah.
Penn State game. I mean, I guess not for what he is capable of doing, and we've seen at least last year, but I'd argue at least to this year that this was his most impressive game.
Really? I'm not sure about that. He had 5 steals. Oh my God.
When Ken Palm does their they do like an MVP from both teams basically, and I'm stealing this from Crimson Cast, so it's not my original thought, but this is the like both teams, Ken Palm will give an MVP, and this is the first time this season that Rob has gotten an MVP from in terms of Ken Palm.
Well, thanks, Ken Palm, for making me look stupid. It wasn't he wasn't his best shooting game, but he shot 7 of 8 from the free throw line on a team that shot 17 of 27 from the free throw line. And here comes the free throw struggles again, right? And then we give up a lead, and I'm like, oh, this is last year all over again. But nope, Rob steps up to the line, 7 of 8 when we really, really needed them. And most of the starters did really well from the free throw line. I mean, I'm looking at Al Durham, 3 of 4. I'll take 5 of 7 from Justin Smith and some really clutch free throws. I think he made 3 out of 4 in the last couple of minutes there. And that last 5 minutes from Justin Smith was probably the best I've seen Justin Smith play other than the Michigan State games from last year. Like, legit. Yep. He was all over the floor, whether it was that really crucial steal he had in the last couple of minutes, or making sure he got the inbounds pass to him and then forwarding on to Al, who decided to then chuck it away. But we're not going to talk about that. And then also whether it was a couple of rebounds that he got. He had finished with 8 rebounds. I can remember off the top of my head there was 2 or 3 in the final minute where it was like those were crucial. Like we needed that rebound. 2 steals, 9 points. And it wasn't his most efficient game from the field. He was 2 of 4, but he only took 4 shots. But we'll take that from Justin. Like 5 of 7 free throws. He played the best when we needed him the most.
Finding a role.
Yeah, he found a role and played really, really stellar defense on whoever he was guarding, whether it was Lamar Stevens or it was Lundy or Watkins or whoever he was matched up against on switches or whatnot. He did his best and throughout the game played really, really stellar defense.
Yep, that's I checked just to make sure that it was accurate. That was the first MVP of the season for Rob in terms of Ken Pom. And it was the first one since the Illinois game last year, so almost an entire calendar year since he was an MVP in terms of Ken Pom, and that's only the third that he's ever gotten in his career in Ken Pom's eyes. And then I was looking at last year's stats, just looking down to see where the other MVP games he had, and I saw that big column of red with that one green line, and I'm like, all right, I'm not going to go back into happy thoughts this week.
No more of that. No.
So before we get into our next segment and we keep going, I want to, since Nithin's not here, I'll take over who won the week this past week in IU sports, and I want to go over to the baseball team since a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think, softball started up, and then baseball started up a couple weeks ago. And after their very first matchup was not an easy opponent. They were facing at LSU. They were all the way down in, I think it was Baton Rouge. I think they were down in Baton Rouge, and they were facing LSU for 3 games, and they lost 2 of them, but then they were able to pull out the last one. And since then, they've won 4 in a row. They've won 4 in a row. We'll talk about that in a second, Matt. And then during that, they did beat South Alabama, which is a ranked opponent. So the baseball team is on a 4-game winning streak. So they're back to looking good. They were supposed to have their home opener tomorrow, Wednesday, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, but if you're listening to this on Wednesday, they were supposed to have their home opener today, but that game was canceled. So we'll have to see when the home opener will come back. But otherwise, if not, next Wednesday against Purdue could potentially be their home opener. And as a reminder, before we let Matt vent for a second, just want to remind our listeners to subscribe, rate, share the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts, so that we can try and help grow our podcast.
So for those of you who don't know, we record this at 8:30 on Tuesday nights. If you're listening on the podcast, just 2 minutes ago, Khristian Lander tweeted, "I want to say thank you to all the coaches that have ever recruited me and have taken time out of their day to do so. This was a long, thought-out decision, but I've decided on the college I will be attending, staying home, go Hoosiers." So that is it, folks. 5-star 2021 or 2020 recruit point guard Khristian Lander has locked in his commitment to IU, and I cannot stress this enough. There's an article coming out later this week that I wrote that I now have to completely change. Thank you, Khristian. Where I was highlighting the fact that he was the key for the next 2 years as the number 1 point guard in his class. A future NBA player in Khristian Lander has just committed to the Hoosiers literally 2 minutes ago. You just saw my reaction live.
Literally.
Fist bumping and whatnot.
4 minutes ago.
Just
8:59
came out.
p.m.
I cannot stress to you enough how important this is. Now, I don't know if he's reclassifying. That is
a big question. Yes.
That is a huge
that he has been thinking about.
question.
He has been thinking about.
And he has been thinking about it. I have no idea. But I'm still excited, and this is great news for the upcoming class. Matt, this could not have happened at a better time. Thank you, Khristian. Playing this out.
It almost could have not have happened at a worse time, because now we can't really all we can do is just kind of react instead of get our thoughts together.
I have my thoughts. I can talk about it. I can talk about it.
Our kid in a candy store look, basically. But I think I'm going to change who won the week this past week in IU sports, and I'm going to move it to the men's basketball team in general now.
Yeah.
that they were able
Wow.
to win 2 games. And honestly, pausing from Khristian Lander for half a second, honestly, I think this is arguably the best week for the men's basketball program in general because
Long time.
they haven't. I mean, yeah, you could go through November where they were winning every game, but I mean, really, they haven't had two at least big wins for this team the entire season. And the Florida State game was one game, but it wasn't necessarily bookended by another big victory. And they didn't have very good neutral site games, and then they weren't able to win 2 in a row in conference play. So then you have Indiana having arguably their best week basketball wise in terms of the two biggest wins in a row, and then you add a guy like Khristian Lander, and I think Matt's reaction says it all.
I
I'm
mean,
almost speechless. I mean, I think all Hoosier fans were really hoping that he was going to come, and I think would you say that this is also um, unexpected, at least as of the timing and especially of who he was picking?
this is extremely unexpected. To be honest, I had zero clue that he was even close to making a decision. And I'm a person, and I pride myself in this, who keeps strong tabs on IU basketball recruiting. I mean, I am refreshing 24/7 crystal ball as faster than you can possibly imagine. I'm like on it like at least 3 times a day. I follow a bunch of people on Twitter who know stuff about recruiting. We're on the website. We have people that know stuff, and we have insiders who tell us things before they become public. So like we have information. Sometimes we have guys on the website right now talking on Slack like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." None of us knew. This is completely blindsided. And props to the staff. Like holy crap.
And doing
Props to the
all of
staff.
this and turning the basketball team around.
Right, exactly. They not only adjusted, but then they closed the state. And he's the best recruit since Romeo by a mile. Keon was pretty good, but as far as guard prospects go, they're usually better. And look, number one point guard in the class, like year after year, is almost always a guaranteed college basketball star. If you go back through the classes, and he is the number one point guard in his class. Will he be the number one point guard in this year's class if he reclassifies? Probably not, but he will still be a 5-star recruit, and that will be the third year. If he reclassifies, it'll be the third year in a row that Archie has landed a 5-star in-state recruit, which is obviously one more now than Tom Crean landed in his tenure at IU.
And I think you talked about especially since Romeo, and I think you could you could argue a very strong point that this could be a bigger get than Romeo, and I think Khristian Lander could be more impactful than Romeo was, even if Romeo lived up to all of our dream standards. Just because even Romeo at his best, even if you were to score 20 or 30 points, I think that'd be really impactful. But just what a true point guard can really give you in terms of bringing this team together. And I mean, you just think back at the last time that Indiana has had a team that's capable of making any sort of run in the tournament. You can't look any far past Yogi Ferrell's teams.
Yes.
And I'm not saying he's Yogi Ferrell, but I'm just talking about a strong point guard and a leader of the team. And even if he's here for 1 year, that's the kind of impact that he can have, because I really hope Rob gets better in terms of health and everything. But right now, Rob's not becoming the point guard that we were hoping, at least as of last year.
Correct. And Rob has shown the ability that he can play and not be the primary ball handler.
Yeah.
And Khristian has also shown that when he played in AAU. So they can both play together. And in my article, I wrote about that now has to be completely reworked. I talk about how a senior Rob Finney and a freshman Khristian Lander is going to be a really good sign for IU. Now, if he reclassifies, this is where things get interesting, because all of a sudden now our freshman class coming in next year has probably the most chemistry of any IU class ever. And what I'm talking about is, no, they don't go all to the same high school, right? Khristian Lander goes to Evansville Rights. Anthony Lilo goes to Bloomington South. And then Trey Galloway goes to Culver Academy in Culver, Indiana. And then Jordan Geronimo's in New Hampshire. But over the summer, Khristian Lander played up a year in AAU ball and played with the rising seniors in the Adidas League. And on that team was Khristian Lander, Anthony Leal, and Trey Galloway. And they all started together. In fact, they were the 1, 2, and 3 on their AAU team, who went on to have a really successful season last year in the AAU circuit. It's not often that you find college basketball teams to land multiple guys that have played together before. Oftentimes, you're putting a bunch of guys together that have never seen the court before. This team, you're adding 3 guys that are teammates, that are genuine friends on and off the court, spend summers together and train together before and practice together before. And you're adding that to a well-established group of guys that we already know, and you're only losing, and I mean only losing, Devontae Green and Deron Davis. And you're possibly adding, if he reclassifies, which I'm assuming that's why he committed. Right.
I think he might want to. There was discussion about it before, and I interrupted you for right now. I think that the timing of this is really key, and he'd been discussing it, and now that this is a potential thing, I think as I interrupt you, and I apologize, that
that's fine.
I don't think it's any coincidence that Khristian Lander was in attendance at the Penn State game either.
No.
That obviously he's the type of recruit that's going to visit places multiple times and think about this for a long time. But again, he was on campus and he was at the Penn State game. So he's been tracking Archie through all of this, and even through the losing 12 of 13 last year, and the 4-game losing streak, and seeing how he could turn around. And we're just probably sounding like kids in a candy shop right now, repeating the same thing. I want this, and I want like these, right? Yeah. that he's just, oh man.
He is a future NBA point guard, and I think he's a better prospect than Yogi was coming out of high school. I know he's a better prospect, NBA style prospect than Yogi was coming out of high school. In fact, he's the best Indiana point guard since Mike Conley in 2006, when it was Mike Conley and Greg Oden playing together in Indianapolis, and they obviously went to Ohio State and made the national title game against Florida in 2006. He's the best point guard to come up since then. In fact, people were widely estimating that Lander was going to reach the top 5 in his class by the end of the summer, because he was going to have such a massive summer in AAU ball this year that the likes of Kentucky and Duke and North Carolina are going to be hot on his heels. So the fact that if he doesn't reclassify, the fact that we got this recruitment over now is such a key for the next year if he doesn't reclassify, because then we have him on locks. We don't have to worry about a Duke coming in, a Kentucky coming in under the radar and stealing him like we did with Keon Brooks, right? Like, we had Keon. I don't think it was out of the ordinary, and it wasn't assumptive of me to say that we had Keon Brooks had Kentucky not stepped up their recruitment of him after he had a really good summer last summer. So the fact that Khristian Lander is now a Hoosier is a really, really good sign for the staff. And I was talking on Twitter to a bunch of you, and I know you're listening to the podcast. And you were saying,
at least they better be.
Yeah, they were saying this week, they're like, I don't know about Khristian Lander. I mean, I know that those Louisville Cardinals. I heard that Michigan is his dream school. Yada, yada, yada. I heard excuses up and down the ladder of the excuse train about why Khristian Lander wasn't going to be a Hoosier. Well, I said I'm going to trust the staff until they show me wrong. The only 5-star recruit, in-state recruit that we've missed on is Keon Brooks. And where did he go? He went to Kentucky. Do we blame a kid for going to Kentucky when they sell an NBA future there? No, we don't blame him at all. Do we hate Kentucky? Yes. Do we not like Calipari not wanting to play at Assembly Hall? Yes, but if I was in his position, I would go to Kentucky too, because that is where they make NBA superstars, and that's where he wants to play. Khristian Lander is now coming in, is going to be one of the integral pieces in either next year or the year after's team, and it boosts next year's expectations. My expectations for next year, when I was writing my article, I was talking about it, were, okay, we're going to be a top 15, top 25 team. We're going to be a really good team that has a lot of experience together. and we're playing in Maui, so we're going to look really good when we play in a preseason or early season tournament with a lot of experience with one another, and we're going to look better than teams that might be adding a lot of different pieces in. Now, next year, we're adding maybe a 5, possibly. We talked about
hoping
it.
At least.
Yeah, hoping at least. Now we're adding now a 5-star point guard to Rob Finney in the backcourts. Now the starting backcourt is Rob Finney and Khristian Lander. Then you have
Let's talk about that. So so possibly next year, and I think Indiana fans really want that guard depth now, but possibly the team could look like this and help fill in blanks if I get over this. And we'll talk about like I'm just going to go for the scholarship players because and we're just assuming that Khristian reclassifies. If I'm not mistaken, right now all 13 scholarships are taken for next year, right?
I think so.
Because we had 2 open, losing 2. We've got 4 recruits if Khristian comes next year, correct?
That is correct, unless somebody leaves. But I don't have any information
for now, and that's obviously what we're going to assume. We don't want to assume anything otherwise. So we've got in the backcourt in no particular order: Khristian, Rob, Al, Demizi. Trying to go Armand. Then we've got Trey and Anthony.
Yes,
those are the sort of the guard type of
guards.
Yes, guard into the threes, and then we've got let's see, Justin Smith, Jerome Hunter. Try to go down the list. Then we're kind of get into
Jordan Geronimo.
I'm just thinking more of the scholarship players for now. Then you're getting into Race Thompson, Trace Jackson Davis, Joey Brunk, and you're all probably screaming at us. Is that all of them?
Did you say Justin Smith and Jordan Geronimo?
Oh yeah, and Jordan Geronimo. Yes.
And Race Thompson.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That is all.
Hit all of them. Yep.
Sorry,
Jordan
guys,
Geronimo. Yep. That should hit all of them.
Fly. It literally just happened like 17 minutes ago.
Literally halfway through our podcast.
So you're watching the mental gymnastics happening right now. But no. Look.
So let's do that a little better.
Yeah.
Let's do a little bit. So it's Rob, Khristian, Armand, Demizi, Trey, Anthony. Tell me if I'm leaving anyone out. Then we've got Jerome, Justin, Jordan, Al. Jerome, Justin, Jordan, Race, Trace, Joey.
Yes.
There's a lot of names that sound the same too.
I know. It is a crazy list. But anyways, starting lineup as of next year, my projection as of 17 minutes ago in the news that Khristian Lander is committed, and we're saying that he committed now because he's probably reclassifying. So with that assumption in mind, my starting lineup for next year is junior Rob Finney, 5-star freshman, possibly number 1 point guard in Khristian Lander. Then you have one of Justin Smith and or Jerome Hunter at the 3, Race Thompson at the 4, Trace Jackson Davis at the 5, with Joey Brunk, a sophomore Armand Franklin, Anthony Leal, in Bloomington guy, 3-point sniper, one of Justin Smith or Jerome Hunter, and Al Durham coming off the bench.
And
tell me that as and Trey Galloway and Demizi, who we haven't even talked about.
Yeah, and then depending on, I think Jordan will be a good case for the offseason to see how much freshman time he's going to get, because that's going to be but just the raw athleticism that he's going to get some time in there.
And he's an improving 3-point shooter as well.
Yes,
look,
yeah.
This team next year not only has depth, but has star power in 2 star players now. We don't have just one. Star power, yes. Like the Death Star. This is what the Purdue fans are going to start calling us. No, but look, in Trace Jackson Davis, Khristian Lander, pick and roll with those 2. Oh, mwah! And Khristian Lander is a really good 3-point shooter. It's been tested. He's on the AAU circuit. He doesn't just chuck up threes like a bunch of these AAU guards do, or as Dan Dockich calls them, shoe guys do. He's not a shoe guy, right? Stays in Evansville. He's a really good shooter, and he's improving. He's athletic as all heck. You're going to get some really good dunks out of him next year. And his dribble, his handle is so nice and so clean. Got pretty good court vision for a guy. Could probably use a little bit more. Runs a really good pick and roll. Was doing that this summer. with the Adidas Indianapolis AAU program. And then also defensively is something that he's asked, that he has specified that he wants to work on. And of course, Archie being a defense first coach is something that he's going to get at IU. So I can see why he thinks IU is a really good fit for him. I'm really excited to see him and Trace play together because that's going to be great. And this just amplifies not only next year's class, but the year after that, like what Archie could possibly get, because now these guys on the circuit that look at Khristian Lander go, oh, he reclassified. Look what he could do. Now look what I could go do at IU after seeing what he's done the season before. So this is something really, really important for IU, not only for right now and next season, but for the future of Indiana basketball.
And that's the exact question that Ant Wright, former Michigan basketball player that came on our podcast last week. If you haven't listened to it, it's still good. He gives so much good insight on his perspective, a guy that is a Michigan guy, and talking about basically what his views on Indiana were. And think about, the tone was right after the Michigan game, so they didn't beat Minnesota and or Penn State, at least as of the recording of that podcast, but he still gives a lot of good insight. And his question to us as Hoosier fans was, he had a couple questions, but one of them was, who is the star players? Who's an NBA player on the team? And I think the easiest answer right now is just the only one that you can think of would be Trace, and that's basically it, at least as of right now. And you can't win with one person being a star player. And when you think of most successful NCAA tournament teams, they've got more than just one star player. They've got a bunch of guys that are Trace's level, if not higher, that are able to elevate their team. And that's the kind of team that you're getting next year. And let's say, and again, this is just, I'll keep reiterating it, this is just hoping that he reclassifies for next year.
Right.
He's a recruit. He's a recruit for the following season, not the 2021 season, but he'll be in for 21, 22. But, and I think what Matt was saying earlier, and this is no disrespect to Devontae or De'Ron, we've seen with the way this team has been slowly molding around Archie and his players versus the previous players, and versus maybe it doesn't have the best makeup of a team, and all of that coming together, which is all of our roller coasters of frustrations. We've seen recently that this team can win, and I think this is just the plainest way to put it, without Devontae and De'Ron, so that they can win without them. So basically, you're losing two guys that at times have been really key players, and especially Devontae's on-court contributions. I really think De'Ron's a huge leadership guy. But you're replacing it with, like you've talked about, all of those recruits, and then you add Khristian Lander, and it's just that's the positions and the type of the caliber of player that Indiana needs to take this a step forward, because you've got this year's Hoosier team which we're not going to be able to get to talking about more of the rest of the season, which I think is 100% okay. Assuming right now, if the season were to end today, Indiana's a tournament team. They're just inside the bubble, basically. That's the kind of player and the kind of key puzzle piece that fits in, that this team can take it to the next level, that they can get to a Sweet 16. And once you get to a Sweet 16, unless you're a team that's like the last year's Duke team that just has so much star power, and again, we even saw with that team, they didn't go very far. No, unless you bump into a team like that, anyone usually in the Sweet 16 has a run for their money into the Elite Eight and to the Final Four. So that's the makeup of a team that could potentially, and again, this is an optimistic podcast right now, but that's the makeup of the team and the pieces that are starting to potentially fall into place. That patience is what we should have been waiting for, and this is what
we're preaching. Yes,
and what we're preaching, and now that patience is hopefully, and again, there's still a lot to be had. There's still even this year, but that patience is hopefully starting to pay off with what we're seeing Archie's structure and program that he's building slowly at Indiana.
All right, John Blau, that's at John_BLAU on Twitter, just tweeted, just talked to Khristian Lander. He said on whether he wants to attend IU as part of the 2020 class or 2021 is still up in the air. He would prefer it to be the 2020 class. So that is what we went under the assumption of, that he was going to try to reclassify. He wants to prefer it to come next year. The mouth of the person we're talking about, and we were assuming that he wants to be in the class of 2020.
And again,
Can't have said it any better.
Literally, I apologize. All of this is this is the first podcast I think almost anyone has literally seen live reactions of a huge commitment.
Yeah, nobody was doing
it's very interesting.
Nobody was sitting there doing a live Romeo Langford announcement.
Nope,
I don't
because
he was doing it himself.
Announcement. He was doing it himself.
He was doing it himself. Anyways, I would like to counter your point about the NBA players, though, on this roster. I would like to point out that I think Race Thompson...
Well, I was saying, like, right now,
right now.
as, like, and this was also before even Race's 2 games. So, like, at that specific moment, especially, like, Race was not an NBA player even a week ago. But, yes, I agree with what you're about to say.
Right. Race Thompson, Jerome Hunter. You can add those, Trayce Jackson-Davis. I think those 3 guys are prototypical NBA players. Or NBA, what Anthony Wright was talking about last week. They're prototypical NBA guy playing on a college team. Those 3 guys have the potential to be. Trayce is already there, right? Race is showing a little bit of what he can do. Jerome, once he gets his feet under him and gets a little bit more confidence in it and gets a bigger role in the team, is going to be one of those guys. Whether that's next year or the year after, I can't tell you because that's up to Jerome, but what we've seen from on the court from him, like last game, hitting probably the biggest shot of the game and playing pretty good defense, just as a guy that hadn't played basketball in a year and has barely come back and was cold for like the first half of the year, has shown the fact that he can be maybe the best shooter on this team. And then also a guy that can play really good defense, is long and lanky and can be disruptive on the defensive end. And then is a willing passer and a great spot-up shooter and can create his own shot off the dribble. He is going to be a killer at IU. We just have to give him time to develop. And you add him to a team with a junior Rob Finney, who hopefully is finally, knock on wood everywhere, is finally healthy for an entire season. And then a 5-star in Khristian Lander, the best point guard prospect out of Indiana since Mike Conley. You're adding that to a team with Trayce Jackson-Davis and Race Thompson and a senior Justin Smith. Next year is looking a lot brighter than it once did about a month ago. So
I'll even add to your point that you've got Jerome Hunter coming in that hopefully if he everyone was high on Jerome Hunter. It's just been a waiting game basically. And if he can continue to try and get for what everyone has seen, this is not you or I saying this for the first time. And then you add, you've seen Al Durham with the past couple of games, his stroke on his shot has been when he wants to shoot the ball and he wants it to go in, it goes in. So you have a guy like Al that can sort of kind of already shoot the ball. You've got Jerome Hunter that's becoming increasingly being able to shoot the ball. And then you've and basically the only shooter that you're taking away is Devontae at a bunch of points, and then you add, like you said, Khristian Lander that can shoot the ball. You add, even if they can only give you 10 or 15 minutes, Trey Galloway and or Anthony Leal being able to. What has everyone been preaching that this offense has been lacking recently is shooting the ball. And again, this is just immediate reactions that we're not going to talk about for too long, just because we had 30 minutes of a podcast before knowing Khristian Lander was coming to Indiana. But all of that is Indiana fans have been talking about guard play, shooting.
Yeah.
And what is the final piece of the puzzle? Basically, they've had all this stuff, and it sometimes it really is as big as just one person changing everything. And I was trying not to do this, but I think this is the best example. And again, I'm biased. I'm a Steelers fan, but the Steelers defense has had every single person minus one draftee this year that's been on this team. And they haven't been even in the top half of the league in the defense. Right. And they got one player, Minkah Fitzpatrick, to come to the team. And this defense is a top 3, top 2, if not the best defense in the NFL at the moment because of one player. And again, like I said, they got to. So again, those are the recruits coming in, but then it's the Minkah Fitzpatrick is Khristian Lander coming in, and this could be the key. Now, we're not saying championship. We're not saying next six banner yet, but we're just saying. We're just saying higher tournament expectations into maybe Sweet 16 and have at least the ability, not the expectation, but the ability to go far in March.
I mean, I'm looking at a shot at the Big Ten title next year, right? With all the talent that is leaving the Big Ten this year. You look across the board at the Big Ten and who's leaving. Okay, Lamar Stevens for Penn State, probably gone. You look at Cassius Winston, Michigan State is finally out of here and out of town. You look at seriously, I mean, like finally. You look at Maryland losing Jalen Smith to the NBA absolutely this year. Anthony Cowan is gone for Maryland. You look at Michigan is finally going to be without Xavier Simpson. He'll be gone. You look at Wisconsin's not losing anybody. You look at Illinois. Ayo Dosunmu? Ayo is going to be gone. He's going to be gone. Kofi Cockburn is probably also going to be gone from Illinois. So you're looking up and down. And what we're losing, we lose. We lose Devontae and we lose Deron Davis. And then we replace Devontae with a 5-star number 1 point guard in his class. And then you add the development of these guys on this team over a summer. And the fact that they've played with each other now for sometimes 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. And you go, oh my God.
And it's not to say some of the other teams won't be good, because I still think Michigan is probably going to be a better team next year. But
correct.
Yeah, what you're saying is that a lot of these teams are losing some star power, and Indiana's just gaining more of that. That they've hopefully have most of the role player pieces on the team, and you've needed those star pieces to help kind of further that. And you've got one star piece with Trace, who's coming back next year, and I think people forget that he said he's coming back next year. I think people still question that, and I think now
and until he proves us wrong, I am believing what he said. And he said he's coming back. And
if Khristian Lander is coming next year, why would he not want to play with him?
Exactly,
even more? Someone that can get him the ball even more, and yes. So you've got a star in him, adding a star in Khristian Lander, let alone potential rising stars with Race and or Jerome.
And Rob, I don't want to cast Rob aside either. Like, we were talking about Rob in the same vein we were talking about,
I don't know about
great
superstar
IU
for
point
next
guard.
year, though.
No, not superstar next year, but
I'm just talking about, like, he could be at least a role player. You've got those role player pieces, and then you've had those star players.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And then. So this is just the dreaming podcast that you can hear us vent and dream right on hand, because we don't know what else to do. We didn't prepare anything at all. So
nobody did.
we will get more information, obviously, as it comes out this week into next week, possibly with, is it going to be more official that he's probably going to come next year or not? And if there's any more specific recruiting stuff that we want to talk about, what he's going to specifically bring to the game, because I know we came in here a little empty-handed and we just know just stuff off the top of our heads from watching him play and stuff. But real quick before we wrap up, I did want to, and I did all this work. There was so much, and I want to give credit to, because I put out on Twitter and everyone was able to respond on Twitter and Facebook and all this stuff, and I didn't want to leave everyone hanging. I was even going to mention comments of people that commented on Twitter and blah 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 blah, but this obviously took precedent, and I think you would want us to hear us talk about Khristian Lander more than yourself, I would think, at this point, since it just came out. But I'm also going to have to retitle this podcast, by the way. Just thanks, Khristian, for making me do more work. I'll take one for the team, though. Matt, give me real quick, don't explain anything, but real quick, the 3 things that this current Indiana team right now, no Khristian Lander yet, sadly, this current team that's going to play the next 4 games at Purdue, at Illinois, home against Minnesota, home against Wisconsin, what do they need to do before the Big Ten tournament to continue to stay into the NCAA tournament? Give me 3 things the team itself needs to do. List it off.
All right. Keep giving Trace Jackson Davis the ball as many times as he wants it. 1. 2, play good team defense. And that means forcing turnovers, not overextending on ball screens, making sure that there's good rotations, good weak help side defense. Do those 2 things, and then you add in a 2-game Devontae Green explosion, 1 or 2 performances from Devontae Green. You do those 3 things, and we're slowly improving. I could go on 4 and 5 or 6 different things that we talk about, but the only thing that is missing from that, and would be my 4th one, is the continue continuation of the blossoming of Race Thompson.
Okay, so what I was doing was I kind of tallied up all the comments that everyone had. It was like almost a total of like 50 or so comments between Facebook, Twitter that you guys had about what the question was. What does this basketball team need to do to finish the season strong and find themselves in the NCAA tournament? And Matt, your first one, get Trace Jackson Davis the ball, was only mentioned once.
Boo.
It was only mentioned once. It was very interesting. Play Race more was the fourth most mentioned one. It was only mentioned about a handful of times, and I think I'm going to kind of lump your other ones into more offensive success because I kind of had to just sum all the categories up. Otherwise, every comment would be its own category. So continued offensive success was the second most mentioned one, and then sort of kind of what you talked about, Devontae Green, was just most people talked about winning 2 games or more and or winning both games at home was basically what was said was win 2 games. Continued offensive success.
I assumed that was part of the case. I assumed we had to get 2 wins because we've been talking about getting the 20 wins. I just assumed yes, that
was what the listeners said. For more specifically, and not one person mentioned defense, which I think is interesting because I don't think Indiana wins the last 2 games.
That's how we win.
Performance
they had. Like Archie has stressed in every press conference since the beginning of his tenure. We play better on offense when we play better defense. It's strange how that happens, but it's true. The better the defensive effort, the better the offensive effort. And we did not have a great offensive game last game, and we won because of our defense, because we forced Lamar Stevens to go 11 of 27 from the field, okay?
Yep.
He scored 29 points, but he was 11 of 27. That is not a formula for success for Penn State. That's not a formula for success for anybody other than Kobe Bryant and James Harden. So 11 of 27 is good defense, and we'll take that.
So, yeah, I think that's another comment that, again, we just didn't have time for, which is okay. We had a lot of stuff to talk about today. I'm quickly going to run down real quick the 2 games this week in case you were wondering. At Purdue Thursday, the 27th, 7 o'clock p.m., FS1 right now. Purdue is ranked 25th in Ken Palm. We won't even have that discussion with the rankings this year. No. There's a lot that goes into it and a lot of, I know, frustrations because Minnesota yet jumped up a Ken Palm spot, and Indiana is still lower than them. But anyway, right now, ESPN, 25% chance that they give the Hoosiers as a victory, 32% for Ken Palm. So Ken Palm favors the Hoosiers just a little more against Purdue. Then at Sunday at Illinois, March 1st at 2 o'clock p.m., one day before my birthday, on BTN, the Hoosiers will go to Illinois to play the 29th ranked Fighting Illini. ESPN, 32%. Chance of victory for the Hoosiers, Ken Palm 33%. So actually, they think that Indiana has a better chance winning at Illinois than at Purdue, which I think is very interesting. I might have flip-flopped those, but 1-1 this week, Matt. Best case scenario. Well, I mean, it's not best case scenario, but like
best case scenario is obviously
2-0. But like even optimistic 1-1 this week, where you feel good, but obviously 0-2 is fine.
0-2 is
long as
fine.
they're not as long as they're not blowouts.
Exactly. You stole the words from mouth. 1-1.
Yep.
I'm happy. But I would really want us to beat Purdue to get that monkey off our back. But look, 0-2 is fine because Mackey Arena is really hard to play against. And for whatever reason, Purdue seems to get extremely fired up to play us. And we just decided to sleepwalk through it, probably because they're the younger brother that we don't really care about. That's besides the point.
Yeah, exactly. So I put a poll out as well. I just got a lot of votes, by the way. Thanks, guys, for voting in that poll. And most people think 2-2 from the last 4 games is what 62% of people think that's going to be the record. 27% think 3-1. So a lot of people might think 1-1 this week, 2-0 at home next week. So that's going to wrap it up for our very crowded and long. I apologize. I think this is officially the longest one, which is okay. Our 130th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to the live audience for coming out, participating in the chat. We really appreciate your support. We'll be back next Monday. Hopefully, we've had some complications getting out. We apologize, but we'll be back next Monday for another edition of Hoosier Sound Off. News and updates, Twitter, subscribe. Don't miss out our shows, obviously, because if you turn that bell on, maybe you might get a live a recruit coming to Indiana. So maybe you should be tuning into our show live on Tuesday nights more often. But leave us a review, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, tell a friend, share our links. This is really how we grow this podcast. We can reach all those passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you